What is up, guys? Today we're going to be talking about the rarest OLL case, that is the OLL where all corners are oriented and none of the edges are oriented. So this OLL case, there's a few things that are special about it, and we're going to be getting into that later in the video, but let's start with some of the basics. So a basic fact about this OLL is that, again, it's the rarest OLL. It happens, if we go just by the pure numbers, 1 in 216 solves, or rather a 1 in 216 chance, because if we're talking about solves, if you're the kind of person who orients their edges at least a little bit, or maybe as someone that orients them a little too much, it's obviously going to be a lot rarer than 1 in 216, but it is still a case that you will be getting as a CFOP solver, or at the very least it's a case you should be getting. So it's good to know how to do it properly. So let's talk about some pros and cons between two specific algorithms. The first one, it solves this CP case, and the CP is going to be important later on. But for starters, we're just going to compare the raw algorithms. So this one, for this CP, fat R, U, R prime, U prime, M2, which I execute like that, because my pinky ring isn't up to snuff. So wide R, R prime, M prime, insert the pair, U prime, M prime. Whoop, like that. Now for this CP case, the second algorithm for our comparison, it solves adjacent CP, so these two corners solved in the front, these two swap in the back, bring the headlights to the front, sexy, sledge, and then this OLL case that starts with RU to R prime, sledge, RU to R prime. So I'll just do each algorithm quickly for a moment, give you an idea of how fast they can be done. Yeah, that's good enough. Alright, so let's talk about some of the pros and cons between these algorithms and which one might be a better one-size-fits-all approach, so to speak. So earlier I mentioned that with these two OLLs, the pure odds is 1 in 216, but let's talk about specific OLL CPs for a moment. So what are the odds of you getting this specific OLL CP where you have the adjacent corners? Well, with the math I did, I don't know if the math was right or not, I think I got 1 in 324 or something like that. So basically if you're never like doing anything for EO, like it should happen like 1 in 300 solves, basically, a bit less often than that, but around the 1 in 300 mark. Now let's talk about the other two CP cases. So the odds for getting solved corners and the odds of getting diagonal corners are the exact same. And with the numbers I ran, the odds of getting those specific CP cases is 1 in 1300. I think it was like 1 in 1296 or something. So, just to give you some perspective, 1 in 300, 1 in 1300. Bit of a difference there. So it makes you wonder, if it's such a rare OLL, and most of the time you're going to get this one anyway, why not just do this algorithm? So there's something to think about off the bat. And then of course the other thing to consider that's important, and this will vary from individual to individual, how fast can you do each algorithm? This one, when I was testing it before filming, I was getting like 0.9 peak speed. This one over here was more like 0.7 peak speed. But it's also worth noting that I was locking up a lot more on this one than I was this one. It's not that this is like a high risk finger trick or anything like that. I'd say it's like medium low risk at best. It's just the finger tricks, for whatever reason with my hands, I seem to lock up a bit more often. Whereas this one, the finger tricks, they're very low risk, at least for me they are. Again, depending on the individual, you might find this one less risky than this one. So that's another thing that I'm keeping in mind, is that this is a safer algorithm that also happens to be the more useful algorithm more often than not. So those are a few things to consider. So there's the algorithm speed difference between the two, as well as the odds of actually getting a specific OLL CP that's favorable. Now the last thing I want to talk about is roll, so ROLL, which is basically predicting your corners going into the PLL. Now, if we use this 2-Jenny algorithm as a one size fits all, then 1 in 6 times we get this OLL, which is, you know, like 1 in 1300 solves, we're going to get a CP skip, and then the other, you know, so many times, like 1 in 300 times, you know, 4, you're going to get a J-perm, because if you're doing this as a one-size-fits-all algorithm, you'll get well not a J-perm, but like an adjacent swap of corners. And then the other 1 in 1300 times, where you have diagonal, you'll get diag, which is pretty trash. Now contrast that to this algorithm. So if you're using this algorithm as your one-size-fits-all approach, 4 out of 6 times where you get this OLL, so again like the 1 in 300 chance before, again I might have completely fucked up the math, and knowing me I probably did, but point being this OLL CP is definitely a lot less rare than those other two. So 4 out of 6 times you'll get a CP skip because you'll be able to move these headlights where they need to go, which is in the front. And then if you have the solved corners like this, the ROLL is such that the headlights will end up on the right. And as it turns out, they do end up on the right, so that's a nice thing to take note of. Not the nicest ROLL case, since most PLLs have their headlights on the left, but I will be getting to that in a sec. And then the last thing to know is, like, if you do see solved corners and you happen to know the alternate algorithm, it's pretty easy to just, you know, do that, I think. But if not, it's still not the end of the world getting headlights on right. But now let's talk about this case. So where you have the diagonal swap of corners, this is where the Sexy Sledge algorithm, I think, really shines. Because you do Sexy Sledge, you do that, and then you get your headlights on the left, which if you know anything about ROLL theory, which I've talked about before on my channel, having headlights on left is generally a good thing for PLL because a lot of the fastest PLL algorithms that people are using have the headlights on left. There's obviously a bit of nuance here or there with specific cases like G-perms, maybe your L-perm, one of your R-perms, things like that. But for the most part, having your headlights on left is good, so if you can take note of that ahead of time, that's kind of a good mental primer going into PLL. So that's pretty much it for the whole comparison between the two. Really all I have to say is that I think for most people this Sexy Sledge algorithm is going to be a better one-size-fits-all approach, just because, I mean, you're never going to get a diagonal PLL, you're never going to get E, N, V, or Y-perm using that as your only OLL algorithm. On top of that, most of the time you're going to be able to give yourself a CP skip, so long as you remember to put those headlights in the front. In my opinion, very low risk finger tricks for most people. I doubt there are going to be that many people who find the finger tricks for this more difficult than the more 2-gen oriented algorithm. So yeah, that's the comparison, that's the video. That's pretty much all I have to say. Let me know down in the comments what you think, if you've got any ideas of your own about this little kind of, I wouldn't even call it risk assessment, I'd just, you know, call it a bit of a pro and con list for both algorithms. But yeah, long story short, I think it's a better one-size-fits-all algorithm, so give it a shot, let me know what you think, and thanks for watching.